Cousins was good when he was pressured, which is a big thing for him because usually that's not the case. Usually, if you can pressure him, especially up in the middle, that's going to affect his production a lot. He played pretty well when pressured. The line is really good run blocking, so the Vikings should be able to run the ball with Dalvin Cook on the Eagles after watching kind of what DeAndre Swift did last week.
You got your Mac and Mac guys here on Birds 365, McMullen and McDonald, and we are joined by a cohort of Johns from Sports Illustrated. He covers the Minnesota Vikings, and he looks like he'll fit right in here on Birds 365 because he's as follically challenged as McMullen or McDonald, but his beard's actually got some color in it, unlike me and Johnny Mac. Will, do us a favor. Pronounce your last name for us.
Yeah, it's Ragatz.
I do it. That's
McMullen got it right. I thought maybe there was a little Italian influence in there. It was Ragatz.
Yeah.
I actually have some family members who go by Ragatz, but yeah, it's Ragatz.
Jody was trying to turn you into a Sopranos character. So I went right, but we'll talk about the Minnesota Vikings. You do a great job covering them for SI Fan Nation. Great week one for the Vikings. Everything looked new. Everything looked shiny. Change in culture from Mike Zimmer, who I think, people stopped listening to late in his tenure there. The shift to Kevin O'Connell, we'll start there. How big of a difference has it been?
Yeah, it's made a huge difference. And don't get me wrong, Mike Zimmer was a good coach.
He was a very good coach.
Yeah. He won a lot of games with the Vikings over his 8 years. They had perennially one of the best defenses in the league from 2015 to 2019 was kind of the peak of his run. They won a couple of division titles. They made the playoffs 3 times. They made an NFC Championship game against the Eagles, you'll remember. But he kind of just ran his course. I mean, the defense fell apart the last couple of years, which was kind of Zimmer's calling card. So when that wasn't there, it didn't really make as much sense to keep him around. There were other issues too with game management. And then the big thing was just with culture. He's kind of a gruff personality and he could be hard to play for. He could be really tough. And that was fine when they were winning, but when they weren't winning, it became a little bit of a problem. So they brought in Kevin O'Connell. They also fired their GM, Rick Spielman, who had been there for a long time. They cleaned house this offseason, brought in kind of a younger generation to modernize things, incorporate analytics a little bit more, but most importantly, kind of change the culture and bring in this focus on collaboration and communication. And the players have raved about it. I mean, just being excited to come to work every day, and it's just been a complete culture shift. The vibes have been great all offseason. People talking about how much they've just enjoyed that part of it and the culture that Kevin O'Connell has created. And then week one kind of just served to validate that and everything they've built this around this program. And his offensive acumen is one of the big reasons why he was hired. We saw him win a Super Bowl as the Rams offensive coordinator. But yeah, I mean, week one could not have gone any better. They looked great on both sides of the ball. Justin Jefferson obviously had a huge game. The defense looked good as well with veteran defensive coordinator Ed Donatel in there. So yeah, the vibes are through the roof right now surrounding this team. We'll see how that maybe changes if and when. Well, not if, when they face some adversity this season. But yeah, for now, everything's riding high in Vikings territory.
Well, on yesterday's Vikings practice report, anyone listed for rest, load management, or old age on the Vikings yesterday?
No, I saw that the Eagles had quite a few of those.
Yeah.
The Vikings took an interesting approach throughout this whole offseason training camp, preseason. They really focused on managing reps and kind of player health. They hired the executive director of player performance from the Rams, who have recently been a very healthy team. So I think that's kind of an underrated move that they made. They've been really healthy, and that was a question mark on a team that has a lot of veterans that have missed time. So they're really healthy right now. The only player who it wasn't practicing yesterday is a rookie cornerback, Andrew Booth Jr., who isn't even a starter at the moment anyway. So yeah, they're really healthy, but no rest days yesterday.
No rest. And by the way, Booth, is he going to play on Monday night? Do we know yet?
Not expecting him to play, although it's possible. But their first-round pick, Lewis Seen, the safety from Georgia, looks like he's going to make his NFL debut after missing last week.
Well, let's talk about that defense first, because they had fallen off to being a bottom 5 defense after being top 5 for so many years, as you mentioned. Part of the reason I think starts with Danielle Hunter. He's been very injury prone over the past 2 seasons. When he was on the field last year, they were pretty good defensively. And then he got hurt. I think it was the torn pec, and they kind of fell apart. Now they've added Zadarius Smith to Danielle Hunter. Are those the key guys on that defense? I mean, are those the 2 guys that sort of make that whole thing run?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that. I mean, the most important thing in this league a lot of times is the pass rush, and they now have 2 guys who are healthy for now who can do that at a really high level. In 2019, according to PFF, those were the 2 leaders in pressures in the entire league when Smith was with the Packers. And Hunter was on an incredible start to his career. I mean, he was the youngest player to ever reach 50 career sacks. Just a really, really dominant, physical player. I mean, you just look at him; he's just a massively built dude with a wide array of pass rush moves. And yeah, he missed most of the last 2 seasons. Zadarius Smith missed all of last season, so they're banking on health there. But both those guys are healthy right now. They each had a sack against the Packers. They've looked really good throughout the offseason. They're both inseparable. They're best friends. And yeah, it starts with those 2 guys being able to get after the quarterback, and they can line them up wherever. That's a thing that Zadarius Smith did really well in Green Bay, is they would line him up on the edge, but they'd also line him up over the center, over the guard, use him in all kinds of different stunts and things like that. And they have the flexibility to do that with both of those guys.
All right. Well, I'd like you to handicap last week's game that the Vikings played. I thought the Green Bay Packers deployed a unique strategy in trying to stop Justin Jefferson. Don't have anyone cover him. Because there were several plays where you couldn't even see a Packer defender on the screen. He's arguably the best wide receiver. Why would you have anyone attempt to stay near him when Kirk Cousins is going to throw him the football? It didn't make much sense to me. Is he that good at route running that he just crosses ankles and just leaves everybody in the dust that he gets as wide open as he? Were there breakdowns? How the hell did he get as open as he was on several of those catches?
Yeah, it's both. I mean, he is really, really good. He's one of the best route runners in the league. He has the releases off the line of scrimmage, great hands, all that. So he's impossible to really shut down. But with that said, I don't know what the Packers were doing, because they kind of refused to use Jair Alexander, their top cornerback, on him. They didn't play much man. They were committed to playing zone, but then they had a bunch of miscommunications on the back end. And yeah, there were several plays where Jefferson just got wide open. I mean, his second touchdown, he caught the ball and kind of juked backwards, thinking somebody was near. There was nobody within 15 yards of him. And so then he just sprinted to the pylon and got in. So it's partially Jefferson being really good. It's partially Kevin O'Connell as an offensive play caller and a schemer, moving him around, motioning him across the formation, lining him up in different spots. They're going to do that all year to counteract the ways teams are going to try to slow him down. But yeah, I would have to imagine that the Eagles and Jonathan Gannon will have a slightly better plan.
Yeah, they're going to play zone.
Put somebody on them. I don't know.
They're going to play zone. They play like everybody else in this league. They play the Vic Fangio style of defense now. Seems like half the league is playing that. So
yeah, so do the Vikings.
Yeah, so the Vikings. It's going to be umbrella coverage behind. So they should be very familiar, each team, with what the other's trying to accomplish defensively. I did notice from Kevin O'Connell what you just talked about. He was moving Jefferson all over the place. He had him in the backfield at times. So it becomes a where's Waldo situation. You got to figure out where he is before you can say, how are we going to cover him? And that lends, almost forces the other team to play zone. Is that the goal? Because they don't know where he's going to line up.
Yeah, I think that probably to some extent is the goal. I mean, if you can get him one-on-one in man coverage, there aren't a lot of corners that the defensive coordinator would like that matchup. But yeah, I think they don't mind when teams play zone, definitely, as you saw last week, because they can move him around and they can exploit certain things to find ways to get him open. Yeah, like you said, they line him up in the backfield occasionally. He had they did that a little bit last year too, before O'Connell got here. I remember he had an angle route out of the backfield to score a touchdown last year. And so, yeah, he just has a really versatile skill set. The thing that helps is he's not out there by himself. Because if he was, it would be easier for defenses to just overcommit.
People forget how good
one side
Adam
of the field
Thielen is.
Exactly. Yeah. Adam Thielen, 30 years old now, but still, I mean, only 3 players have more receiving touchdowns than him over the past 2 seasons. He had 14 of them last year. So he's really, really good route running wise, especially once you get in the red zone, understanding leverage and spacing and things like that. And then KJ Osborne, their third receiver, was a breakout guy last year with 600 yards and looks to kind of only be improving. So neither Thielen or Osborne did a whole lot last week because Jefferson was taking all the balls. Yeah. But in the future, there are going to be games where teams kind of overcommit to Jefferson, and those two are going to be able to make plays.
Yeah, it kind of reminds us of what happened week 1 here with Eagles. They kept throwing the ball to A.J. Brown. Why? Because he was catching it and making plays. Yeah. Why would you stop doing it if you're going to throw it to Justin Jefferson? Why? Because he's wide open and he's one of the best receivers in the league. Yeah, that's a pretty good game plan by both the Eagles and the Vikings last week. All right, defense. Vikings 4 sacks on Aaron Rodgers last week. How many of those came via the blitz? I know our buddy Jordan Hicks got one, which is a linebacker getting in there making a play. How effective was the blitz? How much did they use the blitz against the Packers last week?
They didn't blitz a ton. It was a lot of 4 or 5 man pressures. Danielle Hunter and Zadarius Smith, as I mentioned, each had one that kind of just came off of beating their guy one-on-one. The Jordan Hicks one, Zadarius Smith blows through. He was lined up over the center, over the A gap, blows up the middle, just destroys A.J. Dillon, who is a big running back in pass protection. And then it was Kevin O'Connell was breaking down the film of this in a video the Vikings posted. And Jordan Hicks then recognized, hey, I don't have to cover this running back. So he triggers and takes off and hits Rodgers for what ends up being a fumble that the Vikings recovered in a big play. And then the fourth one was just kind of a coverage sack. Rodgers looking downfield, and eventually DJ Wanham got there for the sack. So they didn't bring a ton of pressure. They're going to rely on their 2 really, really good pass rushers to create a lot of that, so they can kind of commit extra resources and coverage because. Admittedly, that's kind of the area of concern with this defense is the secondary, particularly the cornerback group.
That was I don't know if you saw it, Will, fun little video NFL.com put up of Aaron Rodgers trying to block Zadarius Smith. And obviously they're friends from time together in Green Bay, but so they had a good time with that. I do want to rewind a little bit to the receivers because I wanted to finish off Jalen Reagor, because obviously we're very familiar. The late trade, he's the Vikings punt returner. Have you guys gotten an opportunity to talk to Jalen? Because he had a tough time here. And I was interested to see if he said anything about it this week.
Yeah, we talked to him in the locker room yesterday, and he didn't really want to get into his time in Philly. He kind of downplayed it, saying my emotions aren't going to be really up. I've been there before. I'm familiar with the environment. It'll be a little different with him being an opposing player. I imagine he's not going to be greeted too kindly if he's even really acknowledged at all. But I don't know. He seemed to kind of have his mind in the right place. He was asked if there's any part of him that wanted to get revenge, and he kind of said, yeah, of course, why not? He didn't volunteer that part. I know that kind of blew up on Twitter a little bit, but he kind of just said, yeah, I mean, sure. Obviously he'd like to make a play against his former team. That would feel probably pretty cathartic after the 2 years that he kind of struggled through. So the issue is he didn't play any offensive snaps for the Vikings last week. They played a lot of 11 personnel, but they just played their top 3 receivers, and that was it. They didn't use any 4 wide sets. They also have 2 tight ends that they like and a fullback. So I'm not sure if Reagor will see any offensive snaps this week. I wouldn't be surprised if they maybe threw him out there for a few and maybe gave him an end around or a screen pass or something to try to use his athleticism. But he will be their punt returner this year. And how much that actually really means is tough to know, because a lot of teams are able to just kick it high with a bunch of hang time and then you fair catch everything. So we'll see.
Will, something we talk a lot about here in Philadelphia, and I'm sure you do in Minnesota as well. Wouldn't be surprised if they talked about it in all 32 towns that have NFL teams. Run-pass ratio. Last week, Kirk Cousins threw it 32 times, but the Vikings ran it 28 times. So that's a pretty balanced attack, just slight advantage pass over run. But you have to take in consideration the way the game was playing. They were protecting a lead in the second half, which may have them run the ball more than they usually will going forward. How'd the offensive line play? Because sometimes that's a big dictate too. Pass blocking, I know Cousins was only sacked once. Cook went for 90 yards on 20 carries. How would you say the offensive line filled its role as the way the game played out?
Yeah, so they really like their 2 offensive tackles. Brian O'Neill, the right tackle, is one of the best players at that position in football. Got a big contract extension last year. And then Christian Darrisaw, their left tackle, was a first-round pick last year, who has seemingly, just watching him in training camp, taken that second-year leap this year. He's got a ton of just raw physical ability. The issue is the interior, where Garrett Bradbury, who was a first-round pick several years ago, he's now in his 4th year, just hasn't been able to pass protect like at all. If you look at, I mean, the tape every year, he's getting bullied back into the quarterback, and he's really athletic, good run blocker, but the pass protection is an issue, which could definitely be a concern against the Eagles' interior defensive line. And then they're starting a rookie 2nd-round pick in Ed Ingram at right guard. So that's a bit of a concern. Those 2 weren't great in pass protection. Kenny Clark got the best of them quite a few times, but Cousins was good when he was pressured, which is a big thing for him, because usually that's not the case. Usually if you can pressure him, especially up the middle, that's going to affect his production a lot. He played pretty well when pressured. The line is really good run blocking, so the Vikings should be able to run the ball with Dalvin Cook on the Eagles after watching kind of what DeAndre Swift did last week. But yeah, I think like there was a lot of talk with Kevin O'Connell taking over to kind of your original point about run pass ratio, that people thought the Vikings were going to get much more pass heavy. And I think they will get a little bit more pass heavy, but they still want to run the ball a lot, because they have Dalvin Cook, and they want to, they always talk about marrying the run and the pass. They want to kind of use the run to set up the pass and run a lot of plays that look similar, but maybe then do different things out of them. So they are not by any means going to abandon the run because of the run blocking they have on the offensive line, and because Dalvin Cook is a pretty special player at running back.
Will, interested to see if you've gotten to speak to Ed Donatel yet this week, and what he's giving you as far as defending Jalen Hurts, because he's a very unique quarterback. I mean, there's not a lot of quarterbacks like Jalen Hurts, and you don't see it every week, so it's difficult to prepare for. If you watch the Lions tape, there's so many times he looks pinned in and boom, he's out, and he converts 3rd and 15s with his legs. Not obviously the high volume passer of somebody like Kirk Cousins, but you know, I read this stat earlier in the show. Since he became the Eagles starter, nobody has more explosive plays in the NFL except Justin Herbert. How do the Eagles handle that sort of unique presence at the quarterback position? Vikings handle, I said.
Yeah, so Ed Donatel and the other coordinators are talking today, so we haven't heard from them yet. But we were talking to Jordan Hicks actually in the locker room yesterday, and asking him about Jalen Hurts, and he acknowledged that it's going to be a tough challenge for them. Like, you really have to ideally have your defensive line like get some penetration and maybe keep him in the pocket and keep good rush lanes. And then the linebackers and even the defensive backs have to be keyed in and come up and be ready to help out when he takes off with the ball. Because it's interesting. We were asking Jordan Hicks if it was similar at all to Kyler Murray, who he played with the last few years in Arizona. And he said they're different. Like Hurts is more of like a running back when he takes off. He's physical. He's tough to bring down. So it's going to be important for the Vikings that their defensive line gets some push, but then the linebackers are going to be really key there. Another thing Hicks was asked about is like when a quarterback, especially like slides after running, like how tough that can be. And he was acknowledging that that's a thing that a lot of defensive players struggle with, like when to try to hit them and maybe jar the ball out or whatever, but not wanting to get penalized. So that's something that they're going to definitely be drilling this week as well.
All right. A interesting narrative going into this game for me is something that I learned from my partner, John McMullen, because he's there every day. I'm not. The defensive coordinator of the Eagles brings up Harrison Smith about every other week. At some point, he works Harrison
every week. Constantly.
Every week. You're not going another week. It's every week.
Constantly. Jonathan Gannon loves Harrison Smith. Loves him.
He's a former coach in Minnesota and had Smith as part of his group. So he does. He references him all the time, and he does so because he knows how good a player he was and still is today. And sure enough, he had a pick of Aaron Rodgers last week.
Yeah.
If you work from the assumption that Harrison Smith knows Jonathan Gannon and Jonathan Gannon knows Harrison Smith, how much is Harrison Smith attempting to work with the Viking offense? Go, I know exactly what Gannon's going to do. Here's the key you got to pick up. Here's what the Eagle defense is going to do because I know Gannon inside out. How much, John, do you think Gannon is talking to Jalen Hurts? If you can figure out what Harrison Smith's going to do, you can figure out exactly what the play is going to be that the Vikings are going to run. How much does the chess match between Harrison Smith and Jonathan Gannon play for both of these two teams? You first.
Yeah, I think it could matter. Gannon hasn't been a coach there for quite a while, if I'm not mistaken.
18.
Okay.
Yeah,
and I think it was brief.
But yet, as John tells me, he mentions Harrison Smith every week.
Even
though it's been 5 years, he's always referencing him. So I'm assuming that he knows something about Harrison Smith.
Yeah, Harrison Smith, just for starters, is really good. I think a potential Hall of Famer with the longevity he's displayed. I think the thing that kind of illustrated that is he first intercepted Aaron Rodgers in December 2012. And then got him again last week, 10 years later. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, he's been a really good safety for 10 years, ever since he came into the league out of Notre Dame in 2012. And he's lost a little bit of a step athletically, as everyone does when they turn 32 or 33 or whatever he is. But he still has those instincts. He knows like how to play the position so well, just from experience and from his intelligence. So he's going to be in the right position. And he is a key part of what the Vikings do in this Ed Donatell defense, where almost every play they're going to start with two high safeties, and then they're going to rotate into their actual look after the snap to try to buy an extra second and kind of confuse things for the quarterback. So there definitely could be some of that with him and with Jonathan Gannon. I think Harrison Smith is probably spending more time focusing on the Eagles offense than the Eagles defense, but there might be some conversations here and there for sure.
Yeah. And from, one of the things that surprised me when Jonathan got here, because everyone expected him, he's going to run Zimmer's scheme when he got here, because he does have a lot of respect for Mike as well, but he didn't. He went, he and Brandon Staley are very close, and they run the Big Fangio scheme, and interestingly enough, the Vikings now run it too without Ed Donatell. So Harrison's playing differently than when Jonathan was there. So I don't think that's going to play into it. He just has such respect for the player. It's pretty cool from his time when he was there. Uh, but when I talk about the Viking secondary, I'm not concerned about Harrison Smith or Cam Bynum. We'll see what Lewis seen. I think Cam Bynum's a really good young safety, and Lewis Seen obviously has a lot of talent. But the corners, I got a lot of questions about the corners. It started, I think, on Aaron Rodgers' first offensive play, maybe. That should have been a 75-yard touchdown, Will.
Yep.
Patrick Peterson, great, he might be a future Hall of Famer, but he's clearly lost a step. I think Cam Dantzler is the other starter. Chandon Sullivan, who was here, he started here in Philadelphia. Kind of a okay nickel, but not great. The depth seems shaky. Do they have an issue at corner?
Yeah, I think they might, and it didn't really bear itself out in the first game. In part because they got some pretty good pass rush, but yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. The very first play after the Vikings march down and score a touchdown, I'm sitting there in the press box, and Rodgers uncorks just a classic Aaron Rodgers, beautiful on the money deep ball. They told reporters after the game like that was planned. We were going to take a shot to this rookie Christian Watson on the first play. Absolutely torches Patrick Peterson, who said that he was expecting something shallower, and then just drops it. And that could have changed the entire game if they score right there. They also had a 4th and goal, like inside the 1 yard line. They got stuffed on. So there were a couple plays there where the Vikings only allowed 7 points, but it could have easily been more than that. I think they might have an issue, and specifically, I look at AJ Brown and how they're going to cover him, because if you've got Peterson on him, like Brown has the speed to burn him. Peterson is so similar to Harrison Smith in age, future Hall of Famer. I think Peterson's case is even more sound than Smith's, but obviously a really smart player, a ton of experience, but he just is susceptible to being beaten by speed because he is not as quick as he once was. And we saw that during training camp. The 49ers came here for joint practices, and they have some rookie named Danny Gray, who was like a mid or late round pick, who just torched Peterson on a go route at least once. And so that would be the concern with him. But then Cam Dantzler is a third-year guy. He's been kind of inconsistent. He's given up a lot of big plays. There's a reason why they drafted 2 guys in the top 4 rounds this year in Booth, who's hurt, and then a Caleb Evans, a 4th rounder, who looks to be next on the depth chart. He played 6 snaps last week when Dantzler had to leave briefly. Dantzler is just pretty thin. So that's a concern against a guy like AJ Brown, who's just an absolute kind of truck of a receiver. So yeah, I don't think you feel good about either of those matchups. There's going to be probably different things that Ed Donatel does with shading safeties to one side and helping those corners out, because you don't want to leave either one of those guys one-on-one against him.
All right, last one for me is about your tight end position. I was a huge Irv Smith fan coming out of college. His career has been quasi-derailed because of injury, which is unfortunate because I still think he's a talented player. And I think I caught some Viking preseason action, and Irv made a couple of plays. And I said, it looks like he's back. Week 1, 2 targets, didn't connect on either one. Johnny Mundt got 3 targets and caught all 3 balls that came his way. He was the more effective tight end. Give me your read on the tight ends for this upcoming game. Am I right about Irv Smith? They look better in practice and in whatever preseason action he got, any of the joint practices the Vikings had. Which tight end should the Eagles fear more coming into this game from a Viking offensive perspective?
Yeah, it's interesting. We thought that Irv was going to be back and was going to be the number 1 tight end. And yeah, he was a 2nd-round pick in 2019, split time with Kyle Rudolph over his first 2 seasons, and he showed some flashes, but I mean, he was splitting time, and they were using a lot of 2 tight end sets in those offenses. And then Rudolph, free agent, signs elsewhere. 2021 last year, Irv Smith has a great training camp. Looks like he's going to be a breakout player in his 3rd year. Finally, the number 1 guy, and then tears his meniscus, misses the whole season. So that kind of was a setback. Now he's back, and I thought he had a good start to his camp, and then he hurts his thumb, and he needs to have surgery on it, and he misses most of training camp. So now he's just kind of just recovering from that still, and maybe being eased back in. So he only played 19 snaps. Johnny Munt, who is legitimately going to be kind of a factor this year, he was brought over from the Rams, so he knows Kevin O'Connell. Kevin O'Connell knows him. Wes Phillips, the Vikings offensive coordinator, was the Rams tight end coach, so he obviously knows Johnny Munt really well. So he's familiar with this offense. They like him as a blocker. They think he's got some upside as a receiver. So, I mean, Irv Smith is the more naturally talented kind of athlete and a matchup problem that I do think they want to use as a pass catching weapon throughout the course of the season. He might kind of be eased in. It wouldn't surprise me at all if Munt outsnaps him again this week.
At Will Ragatz inside the Vikings on SI.com does a tremendous job. So you can read about the opponent on Monday night. You can listen to him podcast. He does podcast stuff with Purple Insider. Thanks for your time, Will. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's fun.
Our pleasure. Thank you.